Belshazzar, the Babylonian king, was killed, and Darius the Mede took over the kingdom at the age of 62.
That was the fall of Babylon. As great as it was, it still fell. And we'll get to the why of that here in a second about all these prophecies. Now, go ahead and read the last one here.
In your vision, your majesty, you saw standing before you a huge shining statue of a man. It was a frightening sight. The head of the statue was made of fine gold, its chest and arms were silver, its belly and thighs were bronze, its legs were iron, and its feet were a combination of iron and baked clay. As you watched, a rock was cut from a mountain, but not by human hands. It struck the feet of the iron and clay, smashing them to bits. The whole statue was crushed into small pieces of iron, clay, bronze, silver, and gold. Then the wind blew them away without a trace, like chaff on the threshing floor. But the rock that knocked the statue down became a great mountain that covered the whole earth.
Okay, what we're talking about, have been talking about, and we'll talk about next week is the rock. Even before he was still called the rock. Okay, now Daniel did kind of give an explanation of the prophecy, but we can actually do it better because we know who the kingdoms were now. Of course, he already told Nebuchadnezzar who the head was, the head of gold, which was the Babylonian Empire. Now we saw it later, we saw it turned over to the Medes. The breastplate and the arms of silver were the Medo-Persian Empire. I don't know how many of you have studied ancient history, but there's a flow throughout the entire time of empires. Some of them had an effect of the whole world, some were very local. And as you study, if you study history, you'll see that some of them, the ones that began locally, actually expanded to the one that became the two legs of iron. And we're going to talk about them extensively here in a little bit. The belly and the thighs of brass, this represents the Macedonian Empire and those successors. Now, there was a time where you had the big Babylonian, big empire, then it went down, there's like several little ones, and then it goes back up whenever we have becomes the Roman Empire. Of course, the legs of iron, this represents the Roman Empire. The trunk represents the empire as the whole. The legs represent when the empire split into two. It was divided into the eastern and western empires. And then the 10 toes represents when it was split into the 10 kingdoms. And then the rock, what does that represent? Jesus. Now we've arrived at the Roman, and I've did a pretty extensive study of Roman, because Roman history I just fascinated by it, because there's a lot of things that's similar to what American history is like. A lot of things that we got similar paths that we're going down. But the Roman Empire started out, of course, anybody ever heard of the legend of Romulus and Remus? Fed by a she-wolf until then they founded Rome. Well, Romulus did. I don't know why he got to, but they were twin boys. But it started out as a state, basically a city-state government. We always think that the Roman Empire lasted from that time until the fall of it in around 600 AD. But it really didn't. It started just a little bit before the empire itself started, before just a few years before the change of the era, what we call the birth of Jesus. But up until it became an empire, it was a republic. The city-state started out very small. People got together and said, "Hey, we want freedom. We want to be free of all the." So they started out, and there was just a few. The city of Rome grew, and they started inventing things, modern things, like bathhouses and bakeries and stuff like that, where people actually would go and buy their stuff in places like that. Before, all your baking and stuff like that was done in homes, and so basically the Roman Empire the Roman state government was starting to do many great things for that period of time, and was starting to spread all the world. Because they was doing that, other people began interested in it. So the state kind of started growing, became eventually Italy, and then when the Caesar started, or actually when the Caesar started yet, it was just pre-Caesar eras, they started conquering more and more land. Of course, the romantic part of this, the whole thing is Cleopatra. So we have we have all the things in the Rome. We have suspense, we have politics, we have the backstabbing, we have the murders, all these things taking place throughout this time. And basically, it's a lot of things you see today, especially when it comes to political stuff, where they always pushing. Everybody was always pushing for power to get what they wanted, to get their agenda pushed through. And then finally, at the end, one man stood out, and his name was Caesar Augustus. And if anybody has ever read about Jesus, that was one of the main things about him. The next week, we'll see some of the things that he did to actually point to the time, the due time. When God said, that's the time it's going to be, that's when I'm going to come and make my presence known. And that's what this whole 3 weeks has been about, is how did God get down to that point? It's simply because the world was in turmoil. Even the Roman Empire, or the Roman Republic, was in turmoil until Caesar Augustus took control in 27 AD, excuse me, BC, or before the Common Era, well, however you want to say it. And when he took control, that basically solidified the Roman Empire as the world leader. Basically what the United States has been for a long time. And as the world leader, they made a lot of decisions that affected all the way over into the area that we're going to be talking about next month, in the area of Palestine. And as we're going to see next week, how that affected some of the prophecies and some of the way that things pointed to the coming of the Messiah. Any questions or comments? I told her I was going to keep it short tonight.
Very fast gallop.
That's a lot covered a lot of time.
It's fascinating.
But I don't know if you've ever got a chance to study that stuff, but I tell you what, if you just study kind of with an open mind and realize even though it's old stuff, it's still stuff that's prevalent today, because those people were not any different than us. They were, the politicians back then were just like the politicians of today. The everyday people were just like the everyday people today, just trying to get by, and don't want to be messed with. Just let me go about my business and don't bother me. And we think that that's like the only thing difference is the technology. That's the only thing that's different. Human people, beings have been human beings for the way we approach things, the relationships, and everything. That's the same way. The way we make decisions. I mean, like I said, I started off with, there was 2 decisions made, one in the garden, and the decision in the Garden of Eden was, not your will be done, God, but mine. And in the Garden of Gethsemane was, not my will be done, but yours. And that's one decision led us to death, and the other led us to life. And as we go through this and study this and understanding why God did that, was because He loves us. I mean, John 3:16 says it all. God loved the world. He didn't say He loved the Jewish people. He didn't say He loved the Israelite nation. He said He loved the world. It wasn't the ball. It wasn't the glove. It was the people involved in it. I mean, if you think about it, what other reason did He have to make us? I mean, was He lonely? I mean, He sure could have made a lot better things to play with today.